The twin moons of Alvara hung heavy in the sky, casting a pale blue light over the silent hills. The wind was cold, brushing against the dry red soil, where no one dared to walk after nightfall, but tonight someone was there, kneeling quietly. In the dirt, her name was Asera, and her hands were covered in mud and blood. She was digging, slow and steady, with no tools, just her fingers and broken nails. She didn't cry anymore. Her tears had dried hours ago. Lost to the dust and the wind, her body was shaking from exhaustion, but her mind was set. She had chosen this place carefully far from the village, far from the eyes that hated her. This was where she would disappear, not because she wanted to die, but because the pain of being alive had become heavier than the dirt she now moved with her hands. Asera was not like the others in her village. Her skin was softer, her voice gentler, her heart far too open, and worse, she had fallen in love with someone she was never meant to love, a human. His name was Jace, and he had come from the stars. He crashed near the outer forests and was supposed to be handed over to the Central Guard. But Asera found him first. He was bleeding, confused, and terrified. She had hidden him, cared for him, and healed him. At first, it was curiosity. Then it became friendship, and finally something more. Something beautiful, something unforgivable. When the elders found out, everything changed. They called her names in front of the town square. They stripped her of her status, banned her from the sacred places. Even her own family turned their backs. "You are no daughter of mine," her father had said, his eyes full of shame. She begged. She tried to explain. "He's kind," she had whispered. "He listens, he laughs, he sees me," but none of them cared. To them, she had committed the worst sin. She had loved something less, something human, and so she had left quietly, without a word, with only the clothes on her back and the pain in her heart. Now, here she was, digging her own grave. She didn't plan to go deep, just enough to lie down and let the world forget her. She looked up at the sky, the moons like cold eyes watching. Her final act. "I'm sorry, Jace," she whispered. "I couldn't be strong enough." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small object. It was a simple silver ring, the one Jace had given her. Not for marriage, not for promise. Just as a symbol. "You're not alone anymore," he had said when he gave it to her. She held it to her chest, letting it fall with her last breath of hope. Asera lay down inside the shallow hole, her body curled like a sleeping child. She reached for the dirt and began to pull it over herself. Slowly, gently, one handful at a time. Her face became shadowed, her breath became shallow, and soon there was only silence, far away, in the same forest where they first met. Jace stood looking toward the village. He had noticed she was missing. Something was wrong. The people refused to speak to him, only muttering curses under their breath. He asked, begged, but no one gave answers, until he saw something at the edge of the village wall, a piece of cloth, hers, torn and left behind. His heart dropped. Panic grew in his chest as he followed the wind's direction, the path they once walked together. Hand in hand, it led him past the trees, beyond the last stones, to the place of exile, the hills, where the outcasts went to be forgotten. And there, under the moonlight, he saw it, a disturbed patch of soil, still fresh, still warm. "Please," he whispered, falling to his knees. "Please don't be what I think." He dug with both hands, throwing dirt behind him in wild bursts. He dug like his life depended on it, because it did. His fingers hit cloth, then soft skin, then movement. He pulled her up, choking on tears. She was barely breathing, her lips pale, eyes shut tight, but she was alive. "Come on, Asera," he said, holding her close. "I'm here. I found you." She coughed, once, twice, her fingers twitching weakly. Then, slowly, her eyes opened. Her voice was so soft it almost disappeared. "You came. I'll always come," he whispered. You're not alone, and under the twin moons. With dirt on her skin and love in his arms, Asera lived, because sometimes, even when the whole world buries you, one person can still come and dig you out before the shame, before the digging. Before the dirt touched her skin, Asera had once smiled. She had once laughed in the fields of silver flowers that bloomed outside her village. Her voice used to sing softly into the breeze, her fingers brushing the petals like a melody. Back then, she was simply a daughter of the Valari. Quiet, kind, and unnoticed. She lived like everyone else, tied to rules, bound to silence, until the sky tore open and everything changed. It was a bright afternoon when the human ship fell from the clouds. A trail of fire streaked across the sky, and the villagers pointed, scared and amazed. They said it was a cursed metal beast falling from a war star. Asera didn't speak, she just watched it crash beyond the trees, smoke rising where flowers once stood. No one dared go near. The elders gave strict orders, stay away from the wreckage. They said, it belongs to another kind, dangerous and greedy, but Asera. She was curious. Something in her heart pulled her forward. She waited until night, then walked alone through the forest, her bare feet quiet against the moss-covered ground. She found the crash site under the moon's pale light, metal bent and twisted, smoke rising, and then she heard it a groan. A voice not like hers, a man, human, bleeding and half-buried beneath the remains of his ship. He looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. She could have run, screamed, or left him to the dark. But instead, she reached out her hand and said softly, "Are you alive?" His name was Jace, and that night, everything began. Asera hid him in an old cave, far from the village. She brought him food, water, and soft cloth to cover his wounds. He spoke slowly, learning her words, and she taught him gently, one word at a time. They laughed at misunderstandings, smiled at quiet silences, and day by day, wall by wall, they broke through. Jace told her about Earth, about oceans that moved like living creatures, about music made by strings and sound, about fireflies that lit up the night like falling stars. Asera listened, her eyes wide, to her. Earth sounded like a dream where kindness still lived. She told him about her world, about rules she didn't understand, about how her people feared outsiders, and how she sometimes felt like a guest in her own skin. Jace didn't laugh, didn't judge. He just listened, the way no one else ever did. Then one day, the moment came. They were sitting by the water, the stars above them bright and bold. Asera turned to him and asked, "Do humans believe in soul bonds?" Jace smiled. "We believe in something like that, sometimes. It just feels like two people are meant to find each other." She looked down, nervous, I think. "I feel that with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something. Simpler silver ring. Not for marriage, not for promise. Just something human, something real. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," he said. "But I know you're not alone anymore." Asera smiled, her heart full. In that moment, she felt seen, safe, and free. But freedom doesn't come without a cost. The next morning, they were seen. 2 boys from the village spotted them walking hand in hand. By nightfall, whispers had turned to roars. By the next day, she was dragged before the village council. They shouted names she had never heard. Unclean, disgrace, traitor to blood. Jace tried to speak, tried to explain, but the guards pushed him away. Asera stood trembling in front of her people, people she had once loved, who now looked at her like dirt beneath their feet. Her father turned away. Her mother wept in silence. The elders pointed their fingers and said, "She is no longer Valari." They didn't exile her, they did something worse. They made her invisible. They stopped looking at her. They stopped speaking to her, as if she had already died. She wandered alone after that. Her footsteps echoed in streets once familiar. Even children were pulled away from her shadow. Doors closed when she passed, and yet Jace remained. He tried to hold her, to tell her they could leave together, but Asera couldn't hear him anymore. Not above the voices in her own head that whispered the same thing every night. You ruined everything for love. And so she made her choice to vanish, quietly, to return to the soil that might be kinder than her own kind. She walked into the night with her cloak, the silver ring, and the weight of a love that burned too bright for her world to bear. Jace sat alone at the edge of the forest, staring at the path Asera used to walk every morning. The wind carried dust and dry leaves, but her footsteps never came. It had been 3 days since he last saw her. 3 long, bitter days filled with silence. Closed doors and cold stares. He had asked everyone. He had gone to the village gate, to the council square, to the market, hoping, begging, searching. But all he got were hateful glares or turned backs. Some villagers even whispered lies like venom. She ran away from shame. She left to hide with other exiles. Good riddance. But Jace didn't believe them. He knew Asera. He knew the softness in her voice, the way her hands trembled when nervous. And he also knew how deeply the village's cruelty had hurt her. He remembered the look in her eyes the last time they met. She had smiled. Yes, but her eyes looked like a storm before rain. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He stood up and walked back to the small cave where they used to meet. It was empty, only broken petals on the floor and ashes in the fire pit. A few strands of her silver hair clung to a blanket in the corner. He touched them gently, then stood still, listening, hoping for a sounding sound, but there was nothing but wind and the quiet ache in his chest. As he stepped out, something caught his eye. A thin strip of cloth, green and gold. Her favorite. It was torn and stuck on the sharp edge of a nearby rock. His heart skipped. It wasn't much, but it was proof. She had come this way. He picked it up, held it to his lips, and whispered, "Where did you go, Asera?" Jace returned to the village square, holding the cloth in his hand. He stood in the center, facing the very people who had shamed her. "I know you all hated what we had," he said, his voice shaking but loud. "I know you saw our love as something ugly, but she's missing no wand. Not one of you cares." The crowd murmured, eyes avoiding his. One elder barked. She chose her fate. "She didn't choose to disappear," Jace replied. "You pushed her toward it. You speak like she belongs to you." Someone sneered. "She belongs to no one," Jace said. "But she mattered to me, and if I have to search every inch of this land to find her, I will." And with that, he turned and left the village for good. No weapons, no food, just the torn cloth and the fire in his chest. He searched the forests first. Their favorite place, says the waterfall, the starlight rock, the berry trees, but she wasn't there. Then he searched the canyons and the deep hills. He called her name under the moon's voice echoing across the emptiness. Still nothing. Each step was heavier than the last, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Sleep came in pieces. Food barely touched his lips. His hands bled from climbing rocks. His boots tore from walking sharp ground. But still, he moved forward. Because love doesn't stop when the world does, and Jace's love had no end on the 5th day. He reached the edge of the forbidden zone, a dry land where even the wind didn't whisper. A place the villagers called cursed. He remembered Asera once said, "This is where outcasts go to vanish." He stood still, his heart pounding, and then he saw it, a patch of soil, disturbed and uneven. A circle of flowers trampled, something small and shiny, half buried in the dirt. He rushed forward, dropped to his knees, and dug, hands shaking, breath catching. He found it a silver ring. The one he had given her. It was warm from the sun, but it felt cold in his hand. Tears welled up in his eyes. He looked around, panic rising. No, 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 he whispered. Don't let it be this. And then the earth shifted just slightly. A small bump in the dirt moved. Like a breath, he gasped. He dropped the ring, fell to the ground. And dug with everything he had, the dirt flew. His arms burned, but he didn't stop. Soon. He saw her fingers, then her arm, then her face. Dusty, pale lips barely moving. He pulled her up, cradling her in his arms. She was still alive, barely. Her eyes opened slowly. Confused. Jace. She whispered, You found me. I never stopped looking, he said, pressing his forehead to hers. Never. She was too weak to walk. So he carried her step by step. Out of that cursed place, he wrapped her in his jacket, whispered words into her ears, words of love, words of life. And for the first time since she had laid in the dirt, Asera smiled. A real smile. Because she now knew, even when a whole world buries you, one person who truly loves you can still dig you out. The soil was heavy above her. It pressed on her chest like a silent goodbye. Asera lay still, buried just below the surface, not fully dead. Not fully alive, somewhere in between where memories float and time forgets how. To move, she couldn't feel her legs anymore. She didn't know how long she'd been under. It could have been hours, or it could have been days. Darkness wrapped around her like a blanket made of sorrow and regret. At first, she had hoped she would just drift away, that her body would stop trying and her mind would go quiet. But the truth was, dying slowly was not peaceful. It was cruel. It gave her too much time to remember. She remembered Jace's hands, warm and gentle. The way he always smiled when she spoke, even when she stumbled over her words. She remembered his stories of earth, of oceans and music, and the smell of rain. She remembered laughter, soft touches, and that silver ring. And then she remembered the village, the way they looked at her like she was filth, the way they whispered like she was a mistake, and the way her own father turned away. I just wanted to love, she whispered in her mind. Why is that so wrong? Her breath was shallow now, her thoughts beginning to slip, dreams mixed with reality. She saw herself as a child, chasing light bugs under the trees. Then she was standing beside Jace again, watching stars fall like snow. Then she was alone, cold and buried, so deeply buried that even her name felt lost. But just when her heart began to slow, something changed. A sound, a faint vibration above her head. Then another, closer, sharper, like someone striking the ground. She tried to open her eyes, but the dirt was packed too tightly. She tried to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat. So she did the only thing she could. She listened and hoped. Above the surface, Jace dug like a man possessed. His hands were raw, his fingers bleeding. But he didn't stop. The soil flew behind him as he whispered her name over and over. Asera, please. Stay with me. She heard that. Not clearly, but like a distant echo from another world. Her heart responded, just barely. A weak flutter, like a candle flickering against the wind. She wanted to move, to reach out, to answer him. But her limbs didn't listen, so she sent everything she had into one small breath. One final push of life, and then she felt his hands, warm, strong, shaking as they touched her arm. Digging faster, crying her name now, not whispering it, but shouting it. Like her name was the only thing that mattered in the universe, and maybe it was. When the dirt pulled away from her face, she gasped for air, cold air. Sharp like knives, but real. Her lungs fought. Her body shook, but she was alive. Barely. She felt arms wrap around her, pulling her up, holding her like she might break apart, and then she heard his voice close to her ear. I'm here, he said. I've got you. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. She had no strength left to cry, but her lips moved, her voice like a ghost. You came. I never stopped looking. he said, his voice breaking. I'll never stop. In that moment, buried pain rose from her soul. The shame, the hurt, the feeling of being nothing. It melted in his arms, like frost under sunlight. Jace rocked her gently, whispering words he didn't plan words, he just felt. You are not broken, he said. You are not wrong. You are the strongest person I know. She lay her head on his shoulder, and though her body was still weak, her heart felt alive again. She had tried to leave this world, but this one human had dug through the earth. Through fear, through hate, just to reach her, as the twin moons rose higher. Jace wrapped his jacket around her and carried her away from that shallow grave. Each step was heavy, but his heart felt light. He didn't care about the village, or the council, or the stairs they might face again. All he cared about was her heartbeat next to his. Asera closed her eyes, not from pain, but peace, in her dreams now. There was no dirt, no shame, only the memory of arms that wouldn't let her go, and the voice of the one who found her when no one else would even look. She had buried herself to disappear, but love wouldn't let her stay hidden, not when someone still believed she mattered. The night was cold, but Asera's skin was colder. Jace carried her through the whispering trees, holding her close. Her body was light, almost weightless, like a feather filled with sorrow, but to him, she was the whole universe in his arms. She didn't speak, didn't cry. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath soft and uneven. Jace walked slowly, carefully, as if one wrong step could break her all over again. The place he brought her to was far from the village, deep inside the hills, a small shelter built long ago by travelers, half stone, half metal, hidden beneath vines and moss. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe, and more than anything, that's what she needed: safety, warmth, and someone who wouldn't disappear when she opened her eyes. Jace placed her gently on a bed of soft cloth, covered her with every blanket he could find. Then he sat beside her, holding her hand, not saying anything. He didn't need to. His presence was louder than words. Morning came slowly, the sky turning gold above the trees. Asera stirred for the first time since he rescued her. Her eyes fluttered open, blinking at the ceiling for a moment. She looked lost, like someone waking from a long nightmare. Then her gaze shifted to the side and found him. Jace sitting cross-legged beside her, still awake, still watching. He smiled. Tired, but soft. You're here, she whispered, her voice barely louder than a breath. I'm here, he said. I'm not going anywhere. She closed her eyes again, this time not to sleep, but to hold in the tears that threatened to fall, not from pain, but from something new, something she hadn't felt in so long. Hope. The next few days passed in quiet healing. Jace prepared food, helped clean her wounds, and stayed by her side. Asera didn't talk much, but her silence was no longer full of darkness. It was soft, like a flower slowly opening again after frost. She began to eat, began to sit up. She even smiled once when Jace spilled warm soup on his pants and cursed in 3 different earth languages. That small smile made him laugh harder than he had in weeks, because it meant she was still in there. The Asera he loved hadn't been buried after all. One night, she asked him, "Why didn't you stop? Everyone else let me go. Why didn't you?" Jace looked at her, surprised she would even ask. He took a breath and answered slowly, "Because I knew you were still fighting. Even when no one saw it. I knew you were trying to survive, even if the world wanted you gone. And I love you," he said. "That's not something I can just stop." Her lips trembled. "I didn't think I was worth saving." He shook his head. "You weren't just worth saving," he said. "You were worth everything." They slept side by side that night, not as broken pieces, but as 2 souls holding each other in silence. The stars outside shone brighter than usual. as if the universe itself had paused to witness their healing. Each day, Asera's strength returned. She began to walk again, slowly at first, leaning on his arm. She picked berries, fed the birds, and even drew shapes in the dirt like she did when she was young, but something else began to grow with her strength, her fire. A quiet flame had started in her chest, not the flame of pain or fear, but the fire of rising, of taking back her voice, her worth, her name. One morning, as she stood on a high hill watching the sunrise, she turned to Jace and said, "I don't want to hide forever." He stepped beside her, looking out at the glowing sky. "You don't have to," he said, "but we'll move only when you're ready." "I'm ready now," she said, surprising even herself. "I let them bury me once. But I don't belong underground. I belong under the sky with you." Jace nodded, pride shining in his eyes, and this time, she added, "They'll see who I really am from that day forward." They began to build not just a shelter, but a life. Asera grew stronger each sunrise, and Jace stayed by her side, not as a rescuer, but as a partner, as someone who never saw her as a mistake, but as a miracle. And as the wind carried the scent of new life across the hills, one truth remained clear. She had walked to the edge, laid in the grave her world pushed her into, but she came back with her human beside her, and a fire in her soul that no one would ever bury again. Asera stood before the mirror-like water of the forest spring. Her reflection stared back, not the broken girl who once dug her own grave, but a survivor, a woman reborn from dirt, shame, and silence. Her eyes still held the pain of everything she'd endured. But now, that pain had turned into something sharper, something stronger. It was no longer weakness, it was will. Behind her, Jace watched quietly. He didn't interrupt. He had learned that when she stood this still, she was not lost, she was choosing. And today, she had chosen to return. "I want to go back," Asera said finally, her voice calm. Jace raised his brow slightly. "Back to the village." She nodded. "They buried me with their words, but they need to see I'm still alive. They need to see who I've become." He didn't argue. He only asked, "Are you sure you're ready?" Asera turned to him. "I was ready. The moment you pulled me out." They walked side by side through the wild paths. The same trees they once hid behind now whispered in awe. Birds flew overhead as if guiding their way. Every step forward felt like a heartbeat echoing in the soil. The village came into view just as the twin suns began to rise. Light spread across the rooftops and cracked streets. It looked the same, quiet, cautious, afraid of change, but Asera was not the same girl who had once walked these streets with lowered eyes. As they entered, people stopped. Children paused in play. Vendors froze mid-sale. Eyes widened, some in disbelief, others in fear, and some even in guilt. "She's alive," someone whispered. "She came back," said another. The whispers grew louder, but Asera didn't flinch. She walked calmly, her head held high. Jace walked beside her, not protecting her, but walking with her. As her equal, as her chosen one, the elders emerged from the meeting hall. Their faces were hard, unreadable. Asera stepped forward, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "You told me I was impure," she said. "You told me I was weak. You told me my love made me less, but I'm still here." Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had ever spoken like that to the elders before. But Asera's voice didn't shake. It rang like a bell, clear and true. "You tried to bury me in shame," she continued, "but I rose. Not because of your kindness, but because someone believed I deserved better." She turned slightly and looked at Jace. He believed I was worth saving. The head elder stepped forward. "You broke our law," he said. "You crossed our line. You were given your place, and you rejected it." Asera stared him down. "No," she replied. "I was given a cage, and I escaped it." I was given silence, and I chose to speak. I was given hate, and I answered with love. The elder's mouth tightened, but before he could speak again, a small voice came from the side. She's right. Everyone turned to see a young girl, maybe 12 seasons old, standing with her mother. She saved my brother when he was sick, the girl continued. And I remember how she smiled at everyone before they turned away from her. Others stepped forward too, an old merchant who once sold her fruit, a former classmate who once sat beside her in school. One by one, they spoke not all, but enough. She was never the problem. We let fear decide for us. We were wrong. Tears filled Asera's eyes, not because she needed their apology, but because she never expected it. She had come to show them her strength, but she found something else growing too. Jace gently touched her hand. Do you want to stay? He asked quietly. She looked at the people, at the walls that once closed in on her. And then she shook her head. No, she said. I came to show them I lived. Not to ask for space in a place that never wanted me. She turned back to the crowd and said, one final thing, I forgive you. But I will not belong to you again. And with that, she walked away. Not with shame, not with pain, but with power. A girl they once called weak had returned stronger than any of them. She wasn't there to beg. She was there to rise. To remind them that even in a world that tries to bury you, you can still stand taller than the ones who tried to break you. The sun was setting behind the tall hills, casting golden light across the open valley. The wind carried the soft scent of wildflowers, and the trees swayed as if whispering secrets between themselves. In the middle of the quiet green stood Asera, her long cloak gently brushing the grass. Beside her stood Jace, his arm around her shoulders, his eyes focused on the horizon ahead. It had been many weeks since they left the village for the last time. Many days of walking, resting, and dreaming of a life that wouldn't ask them to hide. And now they stood on the land that would become their home. Not gifted, not borrowed, but chosen, just like they had chosen each other. The shelter they built was small but beautiful, crafted from wood, stone, and their shared effort. A quiet place with large windows facing the stars and soft soil that held no judgment. Asera planted flowers in the front while Jace built a fire pit near the back. Together, they created peace, something neither of them had truly known before. In the evenings, they cooked together. Sometimes Jace told her stories of Earth's cities and oceans. Other times, Asera shared old songs from her childhood, softly humming them into the night. They laughed, they danced barefoot under the stars, they healed. Not all at once, but piece by piece, with time, with patience, with love. One morning, a bird with golden wings landed on their window. It carried a scroll with the official seal of the Valari Council. Jace raised an eyebrow, but Asera opened it calmly. The letter inside was short, simple, and written with respect to Asera Valari. Your strength has echoed beyond the hills. Your choice to rise has made others rise too. We offer you a place on the Unity Circula Voice for those who were never heard. Jace looked at her. Do you want to go back? She smiled, then shook her head. I don't need to return, she said, but maybe I can speak from here. And so she did, using the stars as messengers. Her voice reached villages across the planet. She told her story not as a victim, but as someone who chose to live, who chose love when the world offered hate. Her story began to inspire others, young girls with questions in their hearts, boys told to stay silent, outcasts hiding in shadows. Now they had a name to whisper when they needed courage, Asera, the girl who dug her own grave and climbed back out. Jace watched her grow into her purpose with quiet pride. He never claimed to save her. He knew the truth. She had saved herself. He had only held her hand through the darkness, and that, he believed, was the purest kind of love. One night, As they sat beneath the stars with a small fire crackling beside them, Asera leaned against him and said softly, "Do you remember the first time we sat like this?" He nodded. "You were telling me about how the moons cry in winter." She laughed. "And you didn't believe me?" "I still don't," he teased, "but I'll believe anything if it comes from you." There was a moment of silence. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver ring, the one he gave her long ago, before everything fell apart. She hadn't worn it since the day she buried herself. Now she held it out to him with a soft smile. "I want to wear it again," she said, "not as a reminder of pain, but as a promise." Jace took her hand, slipped the ring onto her. "Finger, you never needed a ring to belong to me," he whispered, "but I'm glad you want to." They kissed under the starlight, slow and gentle. No more hiding, no more fear. Just a human and an alien, two souls who found each other in the ashes of rejection and chose to build something new from the ground up. Not a fairy tale, not a legend, but a truth the world needed to remember. The girl who once dug her own grave because she felt unworthy now stood tall in the garden she grew with her own hands. Her voice traveled across the skies, and her name became a symbol of strength. She didn't rise because the world changed. She rose because she changed, because she chose to live, and that choice changed everything.